So good evening. My name is Marion Griffin. I'm the board chair of Hartford Next. Your co-host today is Jillian Davey. She is Hartford Next LISC AmeriCorps Community Outreach Coordinator. And today we are going to talk about It's Your City, and the topic is public safety. We have the police chief, the fire chief, and the Director of Emergency Services and Telecommunications. So we have a moderator. His name is Lindsay Ewing, and he's going to be working to help you understand better what each of these departments does by asking questions and controlling the presentation this evening. So we will also share resources with you. And also by the end of the evening, we will share with you the fact that there is a survey, et cetera. So with that, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Hartford Next. Hartford Next is a coalition of neighborhood revitalization zones, or better known as NRZs, in the city of Hartford. You can see some of the logos here that represent many of the neighborhoods. And we also have some other representatives from the city, such as the library and also, let's see, what is this called? It's Hartford Preservation Alliance and some other entities that are also working with us to help improve the city. So the mission of Hartford Next is to be the collective voice of Hartford residents, the stakeholders working to strengthen and grow the community. And we want to create an environment where we can come together and actually advocate for our city and our neighborhoods. The Neighborhood Training Institute is bringing this webinar to you. This is the communication and education platform that was established in the early 2000s by the former organization called Hartford 2000. We sponsor seminars, webinars, and other programs, as well as provide training to our residents. So today's webinar is public safety, and again, the police department, fire department, and Department of Emergency Services and Telecommunications. It is the 8th and final in our It's Your City series, which was designed to help you understand better how our city government works, its impact on our lives, and how we can become more involved. So with that, I'd like to introduce the framework, and that is that if you look at this org chart for the city of Hartford, it shows the residents at the top of the org chart, because what the city of Hartford is here to work for the residents. So you can see the org chart that talks about all the departments, but if you see what's in red, that is our feature today: public safety, fire, police, and emergency services. Today, Lindsay Ewing is our moderator. He is from the West End Civic Association and has been a resident of the West End for 5 years. He manages technology and the website for WECA and is on various committees. And you can see more about him in terms of his, interest in music, having been president of a local nonprofit music association. And his profession is IT and working primarily with high-tech manufacturing, aerospace, and defense industries. Lindsay, thank you for moderating this evening, and I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Marion. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody and our guest speakers for joining us today. As Marion said, I've been in Hartford for 5 years, so I'm really passionate about the city. And these series of webinars have been fantastic for me, not only as a member of Hartford Next, but also as a resident, to get really good insight into what the city does, what we can, and how we can participate and make a difference. So today we'd like to start off with Police Chief Jason Thody. He's been a passionate police officer for almost his entire life, graduating, as you saw, from in 1997. Oh, could you go back a slide?
Yes.
Thank you. And rising right the way through the ranks until becoming Chief of Police on March 2020. There's been a lot of changes going through the police department, and Chief Brody was instrumental in the implementation of body-worn cameras and a lot of the changes that we've been seeing recently. And with that, I would like to turn it over to a brief presentation from Chief Thody, and then we will have some questions that have been previously submitted.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. This is a lot to ask in a short period of time, this introduction, but I assure you, while I'll go over this kind of introductory slide, relatively quickly, much of what's in here we'll be addressing in the question and answer. So the easiest way to kind of see what the police department is all about is our organizational chart, which is the next slide. It's hard to see on there, but it's color coded. The chief being at the top there, my assistant chief right underneath that. Ideally, we have two assistant chiefs. One just left to be the chief of police in Wethersfield, but the department is broken into two halves. One half is basically the operations, and the other half is administration and professional standards. So the purple here is on the operations side. This is basically our patrol division. So on the top of the purple, you see the deputy chief of patrol. She oversees that, Sonia Watson. She oversees what you would consider the uniformed side of the house, which is the patrol division, the officers that respond to 911 calls, and the community services division, which is our community service officers and all of the divisions that support the patrol division. So in the patrol division, that's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operation. There's a captain, Captain Vinny Benvenuto, that oversees the patrol division, and that includes also the detention division, which is where we hold folks that are arrested to go to court. We break the city into north and south. There's a captain in charge of North Community Services Bureau, Captain Michael Coates, and there's a captain in charge of South Community Services Bureau, Captain Gabe Loriano. And then there's two lieutenants. We break it down further into southeast and southwest, and then northeast and northwest. So we really break the city down when it comes to community policing, so that we have lieutenants that oversee smaller sections of the city so we can be more responsive. There is a community service officer assigned to every neighborhood in the city, with the exception of the North and South Meadows. There's some of the community service officers do double duty in those two areas, and that's just an issue of staffing. So that is kind of an overview of the department. On the patrol side, we also have the detective division, which is the next, should be the next slide here. I can actually talk about it before we get to that next slide. The detective division is kind of what you'd imagine it would be. These are all of our investigators that follow up on some of the bigger cases. Major crimes division does our homicides and our shootings, our robberies and our burglaries. The special investigations division does anything related to missing people, sexual assault, or youth. Our crime scene division are the folks that go out there and process the crime scenes, your forensic division, the CSI, if you will. And then our vice intelligence and narcotics division does all of our narcotics enforcement, things like that. That's where our C4 is, all of our cameras, and all of our intelligence goes through there. Professional standards is internal affairs, the academy, all of our training. Administrative services is records and scheduling, things like that. Our fleet, which is basically all the cars that we drive around, and they do our budgeting. That's kind of the clerical and support side of the police department. If you come get a police report from the records division, that's administrative services. Our property room, which takes in all the property that we seize or find in the city. Our court liaison, the people that basically work with the court division to make sure that all the cases and paperwork get back and forth properly. Crime analysis is a key function. That's where all of our stats come from. For those of you that attend public CompStat, you know what that's about. You can go to the next slide. I believe that'll be the professional standards. Yep, professional standards. So like I said, police academy, planning and accreditation. We're scheduled to have an assessment to get the department accredited in June. We're excited about that. It'll be the first time ever that the Hartford Police Department's been accredited. and that assessment comes in the end of June. Internal Affairs takes all the citizen complaints and does investigations into misconduct. OSHA compliance is pretty self-explanatory. Our backgrounds division, when people apply to be police officers, we'll talk about that a little bit later, it falls under there. Pistol permits, for those that apply for a pistol permit in the city, that's all processed under our Professional Standards Bureau. And personnel, which basically handles all of the internal personnel matters within the department, hiring, firing, benefits, things like that. Next slide. We kind of went over this without looking at it, but it's on the organizational chart. This is the Detective Bureau that I spoke of, so you can switch to the next slide. So this is a little bit of how we are out in the community. Our patrol division, as I said, when you call 911 or if you call the non-emergency number and you need a police officer to come take a report or investigate a crime, the patrol division is the one that does that. Crisis intervention team, we're going to talk about a little bit more later, so I'll just kind of skip that in the interest of time. Crime reduction team, there's a group of officers north and south that is a proactive unit that goes out there and addresses issues as they come. We've seen, in the last couple of years, a lot of issues, street racers, quads and ATVs, pop-up parties, fireworks. This is the unit that goes out there and addresses those, real-time issues that can affect quality of life in the city. Traffic division is, we'll talk about them again later as well, but they basically enforce all the traffic laws and they're in charge of traffic safety. A lot of grants, distracted driving, DUI, seatbelt, click it or ticket. These are the ones out there trying to keep traffic safe. Next slide.
Que no están utilizando los móviles.
Community service officers, as I said, there's one assigned to each of the neighborhoods. They liaise with the NRZs. They address community-based problems. They work on things like crime prevention through environmental design. They'll work on ways to prevent crime, working with the neighborhoods, working with the community to try to assist in making neighborhoods better. They also bring feedback to the department about what's important to the neighborhood so we can focus our attention where it needs to be focused. Community outreach team, that incorporates our faith-based outreach. We have a large faith-based community in the city, and it's important that we're working with them for the same reason. It's important that our community service officers are working with NRZs and residents. And also that's the outreach that works with the homeless population. We have dedicated officers that help provide services and work with our homeless population to get the help that they need, get them in shelters, whatever it might be. We run, programs to get them shoes and socks, and Officer Barrett does a great job with that. Next slide. I want to say that's the last one. Oh, no, so we talked about the Detective Bureau already. Special teams is your dive team, your bomb squad, your emergency response team, the bike unit, canines, you see the dogs out there, and the negotiation team. We'll go through the academy and the training unit and some of the questions. Special events is just that. These are the officers that are out there directing traffic, shutting off streets, making sure people can get to and from these special events, park safely, enjoy the city, and return safely as well. Animal control is our ACOs, our animal control officers are out there, making sure that all of the rules associated with our dogs in the city are followed. They go out and safely get our stray dogs off the streets and take care of basically any of the animal issues that come up in the city. And the administrative divisions I kind of went over in the overview. So I think that's about all I'm going to say for the brief overview of the department in the interest of time. And I think we'll get into more specifics when we get into the questions.
Chief Story, thank you very much. That's gives a really good foundation of quite a large and complex organisation with a lot of moving parts. So now we're going to move on to some of the questions that were submitted in advance from the community. The first one is really just, why should Hartford residents get to know the Hartford Police Department?
Sure. I mean, so our police department, like many, is full of men and women that got into this profession to help people and to solve problems and to serve the community. So I think we play a strong role in the residents' life, quality of life. Crime can be very intrusive. So I think it's really important that the community, get to know not just the department, like I just gave an overview, but also the individual officers. I think sometimes there's this mystery about police and what they do, and we're really just kind of a bunch of regular folks that are doing this job to try to improve the life of the people that live in the city and keep people safe. So it's important to get to know us so that the community can feel supported by the police, and the police can feel supported by the community. It's also important to get to know us so that you can share your priorities with us. It's important that we, as a city service agency, hear what the priorities are in the neighborhoods. We tend to look at crime, and we compile a lot of data, and we say, these are the things that we think are important. But a lot of times you'll go to these, the NRZ meetings, and you'll find out it's something totally different. It might be noise. Like I said, it might be fireworks. It might be, there's a lot of things that you don't traditionally associate with, going out and catching the bad guy. A lot of it is quality of life related. So it's important to have a good relationship with us so that you can hear about that. Partnerships are how we make the city better. The police department is 400 officers, give or take, and there's 120,000-ish residents. So it's the community, by being involved and partnering with the department and getting to know the department, can have a huge impact on public safety, because the numbers, that's in the majority is the residents. Information sharing is key. Being able to share information with us, being able to hear from us, like in forums like this. We do public ComStat every month on the third Thursday. So people can hear what we're facing with crime issues and how we're facing those. And a lot of times we'll get feedback that's good ideas, things that we might not have thought about. So I think that kind of sums it up. It's basically about creating a partnership.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I know that we definitely appreciate the consistent presence in our NRZ meetings. It's always good to have somebody who can listen, and the feedback goes both ways, so it's really appreciated. So thinking a little bit more about the services and other things that the police department will offer the residents. Would you go into a little bit more detail of some of the key things?
Sure. Like I said, the patrol division is we kind of talked about it already. That's the most visible arm of the police department. Those are the officers that are out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, answering calls, taking car accidents, helping the fire department, helping the EMS out there. That's the most visible arm. That's the one, when you call the police department, that you're likely going to see first. Our community services bureau, as I said, is spawned from our commitment to community policing, where we wanted to put dedicated officers that got to know residents, go to the NRZ meetings, as you just said, and just create relationships where citizens can call a community service officer directly with an issue and get a consistent response. If you call 911, let's say, for a neighborhood dispute or a noise issue with a particular car, if you call that number on Monday, you might get a different officer that you would see on Tuesday. But with the community service officers and the Community Services Bureau, that same officer is dedicated to that neighborhood all the time. So this is where residents don't find themselves repeating themselves and having to tell the story all over again, but they have somebody that's dedicated to a longer term solution. That's really what community service officers are dedicated to do, is taking these problems, these more complex tasks, and applying a broader, longer term solution, and then following up on that. The officer that goes home at the end of the shift doesn't always have the time the next day to follow up, but the community service officers do. They're listed on our website. I encourage people to find out who their particular community service officer is and how to get a hold of them, their numbers. They become a great resource for the residents. Street Crimes Unit, as I said, that's our kind of proactive arm that deals with issues that pop up, that can be either nuisance crimes, quality of life crimes, or violent crimes. They've taken 32 guns off the street so far year to date, just that unit alone. There's 6 officers north and 6 south, with a sergeant north and a sergeant south that oversees them. They do tremendous work, and they have a lot to do with the fact that our violent crime and our shootings are starting to actually trend in the downward direction, which is great. Last year, we seized more firearms than we have ever seized, illegal firearms than we've ever seized since we started keeping track. And that's a testament to the folks that work in that street crimes unit. Traffic division, as I said, traffic enforcement is key. Especially it seems like since COVID, it seems like the folks have driven faster and with disregard for public safety since COVID for some odd reason. I don't know that I'll ever figure that out, but the traffic division is focused on traffic safety. We talked about the detectives and the follow-up on the cases. We've also partnered with some of our surrounding cities and towns in the auto theft task force. We heard a lot, through last year, especially about cars being stolen, especially by juveniles. So we partnered with Bloomfield, Bristol, East Hartford, Farmington, Glastonbury, Manchester, Rocky Hill, Southington, and West Hartford to form an auto theft task force. And we've driven auto theft numbers down by 24.3% so far year to date. I think that's kind of a good overview of the services that are out there. We also have, our special events team that's supporting all the events that are coming back into the city that are live music events, sporting events, the Open Streets Project, marathon, everything that comes into the city. Our PAL Explorer program, cadet program is all youth engagement related. We'll go over that a little bit more in detail. The city camera system is something that you don't see everywhere. We've got a huge camera system that helps us solve crime. ShotSpotter, social media, our new drone program, our federal partnerships with the DEA, the ATF, the FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service. There's just so many things, services that we provide. I will definitely go over my time if I keep going.
That's great. Thank you very much. So I want to ask a couple of questions about hiring and staffing. You mentioned earlier that you have roughly 400 officers serving a population of 120,000. So, I'm interested in the process for hiring and new recruits and new police officers, but also retention, thinking a lot about the police academy you referred to earlier, and also, how that relates to the level of staffing that would be appropriate for the city.
Sure. So we're constantly recruiting. One thing that we've seen in the last couple of years in law enforcement across the country is a decline in the number of people applying for the job. I think there's a lot of things associated with that. It's a frontline job during a pandemic where you got to be out there, every day. There's not a lot of work from home that can be done in law enforcement. So that, along with, it's been a tough time for law enforcement. George Floyd and the tragedy what happened to him, kind of set off a chain reaction that made it tough to be a cop. I think a lot of police officers across the country bore the burden of that tragic incident, and rightfully so. People wanted to see reforms, but a lot of police officers felt they're underappreciated and got out of the business. Some entirely, or some went from larger cities like Hartford to smaller towns where they think, the job will be a little bit easier. Plus there's the volume issue of calls that we deal with that can become very stressful. So we saw a decrease in the number of people that applied to be officers, and we also saw a decrease in our number of officers. We had a lot of officers leave the department, as I said, for smaller towns or other careers. So it's been a challenge. We have a full-time recruitment team. I have a lieutenant, a sergeant, and an officer that do nothing but, running around recruiting folks, career fairs, college fairs, community events. You can see them just about anywhere. They've got their own social media page that you can follow them on. They also help people through the process. They do financial literacy programs. They do, assessment. They do assistance for taking the written exam, taking the oral exam. They do health and wellness to try to help people pass the physical agility exam. They're just constantly out there helping people kind of get through, navigate the process to become a police officer. It's very long. We've tried to streamline it, but from application to going into the academy, it's 6 to 8 months. And there's a lot of requirements that are state mandated that we can't do much about. So We did a cultural analysis back in 2019 to look at our, basically our department and how we can make, work-life balance for our officers, what we can do to better support them. And we've been implementing those, those findings since. We also gave the department a raise last year to try to bring it up to par with some other cities that are like us. So, and we're in contract negotiations. Again, to be competitive in the market, you got to try to give the pay and the benefits that, that kind of go along with the job. So we're working with the mayor and the union to make sure that we are competitive in that market. I think that answers most of what you asked there.
Yeah, and with the level of staffing, the current size of the police force, do you think it's adequate for Hartford, or do you see that growing or changing?
No, so we I did see a written question about this. So we did a staffing study back in 2015. You usually try to do them about every 10 years or so. They use a bunch of different. We hired an outside firm to come in and do it, and they look at like a workload assessment. They look at the FBI population-based staffing recommendations. So it's based on population. They also look at our overtime and our paid leave and lost time, essentially, to see how many of the officers that you have, how many are actually working, because some departments have real problems with sick time and things like that. We did, but we fixed it. We're actually in a good place right now. And they basically look at calls for service and wait times. And that assessment got us at about the 475 mark as an ideal number based on the services that we provide and the size of our city and all those things I just said. And we're sitting at about 375. So we're about 100 officers short right now. So I don't think we need to improve. I don't think we need to increase my authorized staffing. I think it's right where it needs to be. I think we're funded positions. We're at about 463 right now, which is right around that 475 number. But we definitely have to hire and retain more cops to get us up closer to that number.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are facing the same problem in all industries across the board. It's difficult to hire people nowadays.
No doubt.
So you actually touched on, the reforms that have come out of some recent events, and one of the things that was announced earlier this month was the HART team, the Hartford Emergency Assistance Response Team. And would you like to give some comments and information about what that means for the city and for the police department?
Yeah, so that was pretty exciting. With all the things that we got kind of a shotgun blast of reforms and ideas that came at us in the last year or so. The idea of having clinicians that are trained at responding to mental health calls and other calls that don't necessarily require an officer was great for us. In Hartford, I've been here 26 years, and when I got on the job, even back then, we had a relationship with Capital Region Mental Health, and we had a clinician, one, that was assigned for limited hours during the week that we could call to come, to come out and help us with some of these calls. Now, these calls have, probably doubled and tripled since the mid 90s when I got hired here. So we had a pretty good foundation, but we put together a great group. Director Webster and Chief Barco and his predecessor, Chief Freeman, were on the group, along with folks, clinicians, Capital Region Mental Health, Wheeler Clinic, folks from the hospitals, Dr. Wolf. I'm probably leaving some folks out, but we really worked for a period of time, a long period of time, to put together a team that we thought would make a lot of sense. And it's just kind of kicked off here. We've already started to see it work. The officers are embracing it with open arms. This program really, there are calls where you don't need to see a police officer in uniform with a firearm because it's just going to make things worse. And a lot of those calls stem from mental health and some substance abuse issues. We're partnering with them so that they can do their job safely. We're there for them, when they need us. But I think this is going to be a great program to get people more long-term help. A police officer comes there, puts a Band-Aid on it. Oftentimes in places that don't have the kind of training that our officers have, they arrest people, and that is just not what folks in crisis need. I have 75 officers out of my 375 that are CIT trained, crisis intervention team trained, which is an extensive training program that they go through to deal with these calls. So we always have somebody out there that is a police officer, that is trained to some level, at least, to address these issues. This will bring a whole nother level of training and experience with these clinicians, and a whole nother level of follow-up. So we're not going out and dealing with the same folks in the same crisis, day after day. So I think it's great. Cops think it's great. And I can't wait until it really gets going full steam ahead.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. It definitely was an initiative that was really well received, and I think it's going to make a big difference. So I'm really pleased to see how. I'm really excited to see how that will work as well. So we've got a minute left. So I just wanted to ask you one quick question about. You mentioned about the engaging with the youth in the city with some of the issues there. I'm just wondering how the police department's positioning itself to work with the youth population.
So a lot of people know about the PAL program, the Police Activities League. We've had that up and running in this city for a long time. Like many things, COVID, dealt it a little bit of a blow as far as slowing it down for a while. But we also have a cadet program where I actually got hired as a cadet, where you can get hired kind of as a quasi police recruit. When you turn 18, you come in, you get paid, you get benefits, and you kind of start your training process, and you go to the next available police academy. We've had some great successes in that program, and bringing in city residents and diverse officers. That's worked out great. The Police Explorer program is sponsored by the Boy Scouts of America, and that brings in young girls and boys to learn about policing, but more importantly, to learn about ethical decision making, and they get to engage with police officers and get mentors. We bring people in from not just the city, but all over the place to that Explorer program, and that's a great feeder as well. So those are kind of our three formal programs: is PAL, Explorers, and Cadets. But on top of that, we do a lot of kind of unofficial engagement with youth. That includes our national night out, attending NRZ events and block parties and things. That's when cops are out there. We do bike giveaways. We're a big supporter of Camp Current, where we as the police department actually sponsor kids from the city to go to Camp Current, and then we go over there and visit with them, and we volunteer to give out food, and we send our kind of the cool equipment that we have, our armored vehicle and our boats and stuff like that, the bomb squad truck. So, the kids can really see about it, but also engage with cops, and they're developing the future relationships without even kind of realizing it. Cops and bobbers is another good one. Trunk or treat, Halloween time, we fill our trunks with, I will say not so healthy things, but there's some healthy things mixed in there. And we go out and visit with kids and make sure that they're able to trick or treat safely. School visits, we don't have SROs, we don't have school resource officers anymore, because that kind of created a kind of an almost hostile interaction. And I think people started leaning on the cops to come in and solve problems that teachers and others probably should be solving. But that doesn't mean we've completely disengaged from the schools. We go there and we do training programs, and we do meet and greets. We're super active on social media. I never thought we'd have an HPD, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook account, but we do. And the people that follow us and interact with us on that, while there are some folks that aren't too young, they tend to be very young people, and they have we have some great interactions through our social media outlets. So being active and trying to stay with the times, even though every year I feel older and older, is important when you're engaging with young folks.
You're not on TikTok yet. That's what I'm hearing, right?
That's the next one, but I don't know how to use it, so we're going to have to bring in an expert on that.
Excellent. Well, Chief Lurie, thanks a lot. I really appreciate all your answers to the questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time for your section. But if you'd like to submit answers to any of the questions that we sent you in advance, that would be great. And if any of the attendees have got any questions, please feel free to submit them via the Q&A, or you can send us an email, and we'll pass them on to Chief Lurie and get an answer for you. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Just a quick plug. A lot of folks, if you go to our website, we've initiated a lot of new programs that answer a lot of questions. Last year we did our first ever annual report. It's a professional annual report that talks about everything that we did last year. And this last year's annual report will be coming up on the website soon. We do forward-facing policies, so you can check out our policies. Just check out our website and click around. You'll see there's a lot of cool stuff on there.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Marion, could you put the slides back up, please, for the next speaker? Okay, great, thank you. So I'd like to introduce Fire Chief Rodney Barco. Chief Barco has been a lifelong resident of Hartford, a Marine Corps vet, but has been a member of the fire department for 25 years. He's been leading the responsibility for planning, management, and leadership within the city of Hartford Fire Department, and has been helping maintain the department's international accreditation. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Barco for his presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
We'll get the slides up in a second.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So as you can see here, our organizational chart, we'll start with that. Pretty much this almost mirrors HPD's organizational chart. At the top, you can see you have the fire chief, and I have 2 assistant chiefs broken down by operations and support. So the chief of emergency services deals with the men and women that you see every day out on the street when you go to a structure fire or you have an EMS call for service. And then the assistant chief of support manages the day-to-day things behind the scenes, like the budget and those ancillary support services that we use throughout the city and throughout the fire department, and to maintain some of our accredited positions. You can see under emergency services, we have the tour commanders. We have 4 tours, 4 separate groups of individuals that work 24 hours a day in the city, just like HPD is broken up into north and south. So we call them districts. You have District 1 and then District 2. And each one of those districts are supervised by a district chief, who's basically the incident commander at every large incident or multi-resource incident where there's more than one piece of equipment. For support services, we have management services, fire prevention division, training, equipment maintenance, and the FAC division. And we'll get into some of those a little later when we go through the slides. Also under the fire chief, you have the executive office, where you have chief of staff, executive officer, and the chief's aide. And some of those positions are appointed by the chief himself to serve in those positions, but some of them are also contractual. So the equipment maintenance division, is part of our support services division. What they do is maintain all of our apparatus, fire apparatus, some of our equipment such as SCBAs, some of the equipment in the firehouses like our generators, sometimes our small power tools like our chainsaws, our ladders, our hose testing, anything mechanical these guys do. And they also fabricate certain equipment that we may need to fit a piece of equipment on the apparatus. So for instance, if we get a new piece of equipment or a new apparatus from wherever we buy it, these guys will outfit and fabricate compartments. They'll fabricate racks to store specialized equipment inside each of the compartments. They service our support vehicles. That's the vehicles that the 3 chiefs drive and the vehicles that FMO drives, the vehicles that SSU drives. They do yearly testing on equipment that we need to maintain, such as our hoses. They do fit testing for our SCBA masks. Those are the masks that you see us have on when we go into a structure fire. They do fit testing for our HEPA masks. Those are the ones that we use when we go into an environment that requires it during an EMS call. So they're consistently busy on a year-round basis, and seeing as our fire apparatuses are, a lot of them are past their prime, so they stay busy with maintaining them. It's a constant revolving door with the equipment maintenance division, and they do an incredible job at maintaining our things and keeping those individuals up on the front line. Our FAC division, fire alarm and communications technology, they're responsible for our IT inside the firehouses and on the apparatuses as well. They also deal with the traffic signals that you see in the city and the walkabouts. Anytime there is a pole down or a new installation, as far as traffic signals or traffic cameras, traffic boxes, the FAC division is involved in that process. Anytime there is construction going on in the city, in a plot of land, they're part of the call before you dig process, along with Eversource and any other entity that may have some cabling or wire underground. Our guys go out, they survey the area, and they make sure that there is nothing that can do harm before that construction starts. IT is a big part of what they do as well. They've done a lot of work over the years with the infrastructure in the city. They participated in the IP over copper, but now that's gone from copper to fiber optics. So they've been removing a lot of underground cable and replacing it with fiber optic cable for over, like, I believe the last 2 or 3 years. So they stay busy as well. They're only a team of 3 right now, 1 supervisor and 2 techs, but we are in the process of hiring another tech at the moment. So the Fire Marshal's Office, FMO, are responsible for code enforcement and fire investigations. They do a lot of work in their division with a limited amount of people. So right now, that office is staffed by 12 lieutenants, 2 captains, and 1 fire marshal. So what they do is currently, they send out a big list to the residents in the city of Hartford so that inspections on multifamily dwellings can be done. So what they do is they go in, make sure means of egress is up to code, they make sure smoke detectors are installed, look at the structural stability of the residents, make sure the utilities are up to code, there's no blight around the property. So the firefighters in suppression, they do that work to a certain extent, but only the fire marshals can enforce code. What they also do is they execute liquor permits and occupancy permits. Whenever there's new construction, they do the inspections of the fire alarm systems, sprinkler systems. They make those appointments through their office. So they play a critical role in the construction and the upward mobility of the city. They're also responsible for fire investigations, whether it's a vehicle fire or a house fire or just an outside brush fire. These are the guys, men and women that go out and do the investigation and figure out what started that fire. So our special services division is really the, I would say, face of the fire department, besides those men and women that you see out participating in structure fires. They specialize in fire and life education. So they go out to the schools, they go to the NRZs, they do several community events. They're responsible for our recruitment. They service any citizen complaints that may come through to the department. They do those investigations as well. They do a multitude of things, even though since the inception of COVID, some of the stuff that they normally do on a day-to-day basis has slowed down and moved through, you know, either Zoom or Microsoft Teams, but they still managed to get a lot of the community engagement. They managed to keep that going throughout this whole process. They're also responsible for our cadet and our explorer program. So they meet with those individuals on a weekly basis and go over what it's like to become a firefighter and to be a firefighter and what those experiences and, you know, life situations are about. They coordinate with our CERT team for training and monthly meetings as well. So whenever there's a fire and we have to relocate, let's say a large apartment building, they would call out CERT for assistance or any large scale incident that we may need more individuals to assist with that relocation process. They also do car seat installs by appointment. They do specialized visits between the firefighters on the line. So it's a big thing that was done during the COVID. During COVID was birthdays. So what they would do would coordinate with whichever company was closest to the residents, and they would go out and do a drive-by for that person's birthday. And, you know, the smiles on people's faces when they see that was just incredible. One of the biggest things that they do is after a large scale fire, they would canvass that neighborhood and give out fire safety information and pamphlets, whether it be in talking to the individuals that live in the area or leaving pamphlets of information in their mailboxes. And that's how we keep up the educational portion of informing the public for fire safety. So the training division is a key component in, you know, the Hartford Fire Department. They help us maintain all of our OSHA mandated training. They stay up on any new technology or industry best practices that may be going on in the fire service. It's staffed by the fire chief, 2 captains and 6 lieutenants, and they work a 10-hour day Monday through Friday. They're also responsible for training our new recruits. Anywhere else in the state, they'll send them up to Windsor Lock to the State Academy for a 16-week training course. But here in Hartford, we have our own training division. Tomorrow, we have 21 recruits that's going to be graduating and become official firefighters to add to the firefighter family on HFD. Those guys play an integral part of us keeping up on the latest technology. They come out to the firehouses and do hands-on training with individuals. Sometimes they call companies down to our training ground at Fisher Road and do what we call a task force. They might call now 3 or 4 companies and go over truck operations, engine operations. They'll do what we call a live burn, where we light small fires inside of a brick building, and we go over operations that way, whether it be search and rescue or just hose deployment or extinguishing fires. But these guys are down at the training academy, are the backbone of the fire department and keeping everyone up to date and up to task. So the emergency services division is an all hazard division. That's the men and women that you see every day for calls for service, whether it be EMS or fire. These guys are always out in the community. You can see them on hot summer days with the doors open. That is one way for our firefighters to engage with the community that they serve. As you all know, every firehouse is a public building. So at any time a citizen wants to come in and take a look at the fire truck, those individuals in there will give them the grand tour. Like I said, these guys are on the line every day. They do everything from put out fires to do hazardous materials calls You know, if you hear something in your basement, they call 911, we come. It really doesn't matter what the call is. If you're calling 911, whether it be an odor problem or the water outside is just running and overflowing, our guys will come and mitigate the problem. And if we can't do it, we'll make a phone call and get someone out that can. But that's the meat and potatoes of the fire department when it comes to emergency services or just calls for services in general.
Chief Barker, that's great. Thank you very much for your answers. And there's a lot of information in there. So I've got a couple of questions for you that were submitted before the webinar. I guess I want to start with some of the questions about staffing. You talked about 21 recruits that are recently graduating. And again, this is a similar question to what we posed to Chief Thody was, you know, are you staffed at appropriate levels, or and have you, you know, and doing an active recruitment and retention policy?
So right now, so the appropriate staffing level for the fire department would be anywhere between 440 and 452, 455. Right now we're I'm sorry, 350 and 350, 350, 345 and 355. But right now we're down to about 320. And that's through attrition. Within the last 5 years, we had over 180 people retire or leave. Just like the PD and the fire service in general, or EMS, this is the first time that we've seen individuals leave the fire service to seek employment somewhere else. Like Chief Thody said, there's a number of different factors that's involved with that. But we do actively recruit through our special services division, through our social media. But when we're fully staffed with personnel, it is adequate for the size of the city and the population.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, this is going to be trouble across the board trying to get people. So I guess the other question that we asked Chief Thody would be about the HART team as well. How does that impact the fire department? Are you involved with that at all, and how do you support that?
Yes, sir. Like everyone else that was part of this initiative, we're very excited about the HART team. Once they get up and running 100%, the Hartford Fire Department through initial training will be able to utilize the HART team as well. So as you all know, we do EMS calls. We average over 28,000 calls for service a year when it comes to EMS. And a lot of times when we get those calls, they're not always what they're called in for, right? So we can get a call for stomach pains, and we get to that individual's residence and they could be sitting outside on the stoop just wanting to talk to someone. But having that tool in the tool bag as far as a HART team to be able to call them up and say, hey, it's not a medical emergency. This individual needs to talk to someone for whatever reason. Having that ability to have that individual help come out to the scene and supply those services and then have follow-up services, we're really excited about that.
That's great. Yeah, it's going to be an exciting initiative. And just I'm watching out for our time here, so I did want to ask you about the significance of the Insurance Services Office Class 1 rating. You mentioned that at the beginning. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the importance of that.
So the ISO, it's Insurance Services Offices, is a company that comes in and rates your fire department on how well they can mitigate incidents as it pertains to fires. And when you receive a score based on, I believe it's 0 to 110, and you rate it high enough as a Class 1, that makes your department, it gives your it tells the insurance company that your department has the ability to mitigate that incident, and the likelihood of your house burning down is very minimal. So They send that information to the insurance companies, and the insurance companies lower your insurance premiums. So being a class 1 department, having the highest rating allows its citizens to have lower insurance rates.
That's excellent. That's definitely a benefit for everybody. I think just one final question, and you talked about the services program with the cadet program and reaching out to the community. Conversely, is there engagement you're looking for the community that you would like to improve or see more feedback from us in the community?
So we, just like HPD, we attend a lot of the NRZ meetings, but for that particular division, we have a captain and 2 lieutenants, and we might have some folks on the line that want to be detailed up there. So we don't have an abundance of resources to meet every NRZ meeting, but the meetings that we go to on a consistent basis, we do get a lot of feedback from those NRZ meetings, and for us to bring information pertaining to the fire department in terms of cost for services, it's really helpful for those individuals. What we started doing was explaining programs and initiatives that we want to put forth to the community in terms of what we're working toward to provide better services. We also started talking about renters insurance and smoke detectors, and every month the plan is to have a theme going forward to give those NRZs and the public information that they can use on a daily basis. But the feedback has been phenomenal in both directions.
Okay, great, thanks. Actually, and just one last question. We wanted to just talk about the facilities, particularly thinking about the firehouses. Just thinking about how many we have in the city, how many, on average we've got, staff per firehouse. I mean, are they all utilized? Is there any, underutilized locations within the city?
No, sir. Every firehouse is fully staffed 24 hours a day. We have 11 stations strategically located throughout the city. We could actually use more fire, like another station, because we're running out of room. We used to have our headquarters at Pearl Street, but that closed down. And so we can use we can always use another fire station. So if you all want to advocate for us getting a new fire station, we'd be more than happy to accept that. But they're adequately staffed. Contractually, we have a minimum manning of 4 people per apparatus. So we have 2 types of apparatuses: an engine, that's the truck that puts out the fire, and then we have a ladder, and that's the truck that you see do all the rescues. Those are the guys that you see on the roof, and those are the guys that you see up in the bucket and climb the ladder. So each one of those apparatus have a minimum staffing of 4, but generally the ladder truck has 5 individuals on it.
Excellent. Well, Chief Barker, thank you very much for your time and answering all the questions. I know there were some we didn't get to, and if you want to submit your answers via email, we can send them out to everybody. And similarly, if we get any answers from our attendees, we'll pass them on to you to be answered. But thank you for a great presentation and really a lot of really interesting information.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we'll get the slides up and we'll get onto our next guest speaker. So I'd like to introduce Susan Webster. Susan has been involved with emergency services for 34 years and 15 years in public safety. She was also a key in implementing the next generation 911 in a couple of communication centers. Currently is serving as the president of the Connecticut chapter of the National Emergency Number Association, and also spent 9 years as the president of the Connecticut Managers of Emergency Communications. And Susan, with that, I'd like to turn it over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I appreciate it, and appreciate the invitation here to speak to the residents here of the city of Hartford. So I am the director of the Department of Emergency Services and Telecommunications. Within our department, we have 5 divisions. Each of those 5 divisions does their own specific thing. I think what's most in the eye of the public is the communication center. So our communication center, we answer all incoming 911 and non-emergency calls for service. And we dispatch fire, police, and emergency services, or the ambulance calls. We also have a false alarm division, and they are responsible for the intake of alarm applications and alarm renewals. We also send out bills to those who have numerous false alarms. We have an information technology division. They're responsible for the maintenance of our computer-aided dispatch system, the police department's records management system, and other ancillary things throughout the department from an IT perspective. We also have a radio division within the department, and what they do is oversee the entire radio infrastructure for the city of Hartford, and that would include Hartford Police, Hartford Fire, the Board of Education, licenses and inspections, and the Department of Public Works, and a few other departments as well. And that's a citywide radio system. And then, of course, we have our administrative piece of the department, and administration oversees the human resources piece, payroll, we do the processing and payment of bills and such, just to support the entire communication center. So those are basically the different departments we have. And of course, this photo here is actually showing you the view of what the dispatchers see when they sit down at the position as a dispatcher for the city of Hartford. So those are all the screens that they look at, and as they're taking incoming 911 and non-emergency calls and dispatching law enforcement, police, and EMS. So you can go to the next screen. Perfect. So this is just outlining the calls for service that we take. I've given you basically a 3-year overview of the emergency calls that we're taking here in the dispatch center. You can see just in the year 2021, we took about 435,000 phone calls. Out of those phone calls, 127,000 of them were 911 calls. That averages to about 15 911 calls per hour. But what's interesting is we do take almost double the number of calls that come in on our 10-digit phone lines as opposed to coming in via the 911 system. We dispatch the police department to just over 142,000 calls for service. And the fire department is split, where they responded to a little over 22,000 calls for medical calls as first responders, and then 7,600 calls for fire suppression in the year 2021. And then the ambulances responded to 36,000, almost 37,000 calls for service. So we are the busiest communication center in the state of Connecticut, handling the most 911 calls and the most numbers of dispatches, and arguably the busiest in all of New England. You can go to the next slide. Perfect. So I thought, after speaking to a few folks about this presentation tonight, that'd be a good opportunity to discuss 911 and when you call 911. So we outlined some different areas where it is an appropriate means to call the 911 system. And those are life and death emergencies and crimes in progress. I gave a couple different explanations of what that actually means. So someone that's actually in a life-threatening situation, any type of fire, a structure fire, a vehicle fire, or a brush fire is absolutely a 911 type of emergency. Any type of a motor vehicle accident, especially one with injuries. Injuries or medical conditions requiring an ambulance transport to the hospital is always a reason to call 911. Chemical spills, we're also encourage you to call with smoke detector activations, carbon monoxide alarms, or any other alarm that is sounding should initiate a 911 call. Any type of smoke in a building, especially if you don't know why there's smoke in the building, or being a victim or a witness of any type of crime is always a case to call 911. These are some non-emergency situations where you would not call 911. We would encourage you to call the non-emergency number here at the police department. that number is 860-757-4000. You'll get the same person that's going to answer your phone, but those calls aren't prioritized as 911 calls are. This is for basic information or to ask a question related to the city of Hartford. If you have an injured or lost pet, that's when you call the non-emergency line. If you have an abandoned vehicle, if you're asking for directions, a parking complaint, to inquire if someone's been arrested, you should never call 911 for those reasons. Please call the emergency line. Or if you have any questions about tickets, warrants, court dates, etc. We get those calls every day. People do call 911, which prohibits us from answering other 911 calls. So we do encourage people to use our non-emergency number if it's not a life-threatening emergency. And what do you expect when you call 911? So when people call 911, they're having the worst day of their life. People don't call 911 often. So we want you to know what to expect when you are calling 911. Your call is going to be answered by a certified public safety dispatcher. All of our dispatchers go through a training through the state of Connecticut, as well as additional training that we provide here in the communication center. Some of it is done online, some of it is done in person, and some of it is done right on the dispatch floor as we train our new dispatchers. But your call will always be answered by a certified dispatcher. And we'll ask you some very important questions that are necessary for us to dispatch the appropriate resources to your emergency. Specifically, what's the location of your emergency, the callback number. So if we need to call you back to obtain additional information, if we can't find you, or if we need to provide additional information to you regarding the call. And we need to know what the nature of the emergency is. Is it police, fire, or medical? And then based on what that answer is, we'll ask you additional questions and provide you some more information relative to your emergency. And we always encourage callers to please stay on the line until the dispatcher terminates the call. Don't just hang up. They might be entering information into the computer-aided dispatch system. And if so, wait for them to disconnect the call. And always, if the emergency gets any worse, we ask that you do call 911 back immediately. Next slide. See, I don't have as much to say as my colleagues, Chief Barco and Chief Thody did, but I think that's a pretty good basic overview of what we do here in the Department of Emergency Services and Telecommunications.
Susan, that's great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the information. So we do have some questions for you as well.
Sure.
I think, just what you had in your last slide as well about hiring, I'd like to just, get a figure for, how many open positions do you have, and, how are you actively recruiting for people within the department?
Thank you, Lindsay, for asking that question. We are hiring. We are hiring dispatchers. You can go on to www.hartfordct.gov. We currently have a posting up on our website at recruiting emergency telecommunications dispatchers. As Chief Thody and Chief Barco both alluded to, we are at a staffing shortage as well. Here in Hartford, the state of Connecticut, as well as across the country, folks are having difficulty hiring dispatchers, and there are shortages everywhere. What we require, I'm just going to keep going on this one, Lindsay. What we require to be a dispatcher is a high school education or a GED. And we do all of the other training here at the dispatch center. We pay for it, and we pay you to take that training. It's a difficult job, just as it is to be a firefighter or a police officer, because we work, we never close. We're here nights, weekends, holidays, birthdays, weddings, anniversaries. We work all of that, and it's a difficult job. But it's a very, very rewarding job as well. So yes, we are understaffed. We are currently recruiting. We're testing, I think, 38 individuals next week, and hopefully we'll find some good candidates to take those positions.
That's great. Well, good luck. Hopefully you'll find a lot of really good people.
Thank you.
So I was really interested in some of the technology that you were talking about. Obviously, we talked at the beginning, I'm in IT, so I was quite impressed to see all the displays there and the different systems you use. But can you talk a little bit about the other communications that you use other than just the regular 911 phone? Are there some text to 911? Is some other services that people should be taking advantage of as well, maybe in the non-emergency side?
Sure. So text to 911 is an excellent feature of the 911 system. It was implemented by the state of Connecticut, who owns and services the 911 system throughout the state. And it was implemented back in 2018. And that's when it was installed here in the city of Hartford. We encourage people to dial 911 on their phone if they can, because that's the best way to communicate with someone and to have a dialogue with someone on the phone. However, there are instances such as domestic violence, the hearing impaired, if you are just in a situation where you're going to put yourself in danger, if someone hears you speaking to someone on the phone, those are the situations where you should be texting to 911. And then we can go back and forth with you. It's a little more difficult, but there are definitely life-saving measures when you're able to use that texting feature as opposed to just a regular telephone for the 911 system.
That's great. Yeah, it's good to know that you're embracing new technology as well and making it as easy as possible for people. We have one question from the attendees. Somebody's asking, what does the testing for dispatcher involves related to recruitment?
Oh, great question. Thank you for asking. So we use a computer software called Critical, and it's computer-based. And it takes, and that's what we are testing on that next week with our new applicants. And it just tests your multitasking skills. It tests your memory recall. It tests your ability to read and be able to remember some of the things that you read and then type that into a different section. It asks you some basic questions about different responders that you may want to send. It's nothing that we would expect you to know anything relative to Hartford policies, procedures without getting that actual training. But we're just trying to get an understanding and a feeling if somebody is going to be a good candidate. Their typing skills, because it's, as you saw those computer screens, we have several keyboards, several different types of applications that we use. So that is the testing that we use for our applicants.
Excellent. So I want to ask you the same question I asked the other two guest speakers as well about the new HEART team initiative. Now, obviously you're very familiar with it and may be involved in it. How do you see that affecting the emergency services? Do you treat it like an additional emergency service, or is it more like a subcomponent of the existing capabilities we have?
Sure. Well, we, and I have been involved in this since the beginning. This has been something that Mayor Bronin has been so excited about and knew this was going to be fantastic for the city of Hartford. And I'm probably on 3 conference calls a week, just trying to get this implementation out. And we're so excited. We've talked to dispatch centers throughout the country. Austin actually has a phenomenal program where they are dispatching social workers and mental health professionals out to emergency calls. So we will be processing those calls. If there's any question that we need a fast response for law enforcement, fire, or EMS, there will be no question. They will be sent immediately. But if we're finding that a call is a true mental health emergency, where we can have either Wheeler Clinic, mobile crisis, CRT, respond to that scene in conjunction with our other first responders, or even by themselves, we will go through a protocol to make that determination whether we can send a different type of responder to that scene. Excellent.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be good to be able to catch these things right at the very first point of contact.
Absolutely.
So I guess on that similar vein, I'm just interested about some other services that your department provides other than just the 911 emergency dispatch.
So, and I kind of spoke about it during my presentation. So we have an alarms division that we have under this department. And that is if you have a fire alarm or a police alarm in your home that connects to a ADT or one of the other alarm systems, you're required by city ordinance to register that alarm. So we process all those alarms and we send out renewal notices on an annual basis to those alarm holders. So we have that department. We have our administration, which offers support to our other divisions. as well as our IT division and our radio division.
Great, thank you. I think that's really all the questions we had. I'm just wondering if there's anything else you'd like to share with everybody before we wrap things up for today.
Well, I definitely wanted to talk about recruitment. It's exciting for us to be able to get new dispatchers in. And as I had said, we are definitely short-staffed. We need to get our dispatchers a break. They are a phenomenal group of individuals who work incredibly hard every single day. You know, we're the voice behind that microphone that nobody sees all that often, but they are hard, dedicated individuals. So we're excited to get some new staff in here to be able to assist them and then learn to get some of their knowledge so we can serve the citizens as well as our first responders throughout the city. So we're excited for that. We are looking to get a new public safety radio infrastructure in place. Our current infrastructure is about 40 years old. We have an RFP that's out right now. So that's a very exciting project that we're working on. We're also working on closing out our new computer-aided dispatch project that we had ongoing, which is assisting both the call takers as well as the dispatchers and the responders in the field. So lots happening in the department.
That's great. Well, Susan, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And Sam, if there's any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, if you'd like to send us the details, we can make them available. And similarly, if we have any additional questions, we'll send them to you for a response. But I just want to thank you again for your time and all the information today. And
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I'll turn it back over to Marion.
Well, and I have one question, and you might have already answered it, but if we were interested in the citizen alert system and how to engage it, could you give us that information and actually put it in the chat?
Sure. It's actually the same website, hartfordct.gov. You can go to that website. You can register for the citizen alert system. It's a really cool system, and you actually register for it at any time if you need to make changes to what you've entered into the system. You get a username and password. You can go back in and you can register with your home phone, with your cell phone, for text messages or emails, however you want to be alerted, and you can select what you want to be alerted for. I encourage everyone to do it. If you have parents or children that live in another town, you can actually subscribe to their emergency alert system as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I guess I should do that. I have to confess, I haven't done it.
Yes, you should do that.
Yeah, so just type that in the chat, because I know you said it twice, but it just takes me a little while to connect. But thank you so much for joining us. And I just want to share with everyone the next steps. So I'm going to share my screen again. And let's see if I can do this pretty quickly. So where are we? So we've completed the program today. We've actually completed our the 8th in our series of webinars on getting to know the city. And we'd like for attendees to actually take a survey to give us some feedback on how to improve our webinars and to perhaps identify topics that you'd like to see for future programs. So this program will be available on our website and it will be available on HPA-TV. I don't know if any of you watch HPA-TV, but you can see some of the prior webinars showing. They show sometimes at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or sometimes 2 p.m. in the afternoon on the weekends. I don't know. I don't have a clear schedule. I know sometimes I see them at many different times. So this recording will also be available probably within the next week. You can go to our website, and I think you will see that link a little bit later to see some of the other programs. You will get the slides sent out to you hopefully within the week, so that you can actually see the information that was provided by each of our panelists. And because there was a lot of information presented, and sometimes it's easier to take your time and take a look at it and get to understand it. So
Marion, I'm sorry to interrupt. We have one final question from an attendee.
Okay.
This one's probably for Susan. They're just asking a question of what services are available in the city to help deaf or hard of hearing population?
Oh, very good question.
So that is a great question. I agree. I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question. I know that 211 is a fantastic resource to find out if, in fact, there are other things out in the community to assist. 311 might be another option, but I do know with 911, if you need emergency services, you can text to 911 as opposed to calling to 911, and we can get all the information that's required to send any type of emergency services to your home.
Yes. So that brings up the question to you, Susan, about text to 911. Is there any information that could be shared with that, or is it just simply you can text 911 now as an option?
No, that's all it is. It's just as if you're texting someone else. So all you have to do as you're texting, instead of writing 860 in the phone number, you just do 911, and you text just as if you were texting anyone else, and it'll ring like a regular phone in our dispatch center, but the dispatcher will be alerted that it's a text call. They can text back and forth just as you would with a regular texting conversation.
Yeah, that's a great feature, because sometimes you can't talk and you need to be silent to protect yourself. So that's a great feature. Yeah. So, so Hartford, if you are not aware of your neighborhood revitalization zone, you can go to our website, which is listed here, and at the section Find Your NRZ, and you can find your neighborhood and find which NRZ that you is in your zone. And it would be great if you could actually go to one of the meetings, and it does tell you the date that they do meet. Most of the NRZs are meeting by Zoom or doing hybrids, but you can contact the chair and they can actually let you know whether they're doing a virtual meeting, a hybrid meeting, or an in-person meeting. I'd like to thank Hartford Foundation for making these webinars possible. Without their funding, this would be a little bit more challenging. I'd also like to thank the City of Hartford, and I would like to thank today's panelists, Police Chief Jason Thody, Fire Chief Rodney Barco, and of course, Susan Webster. I'd also like to thank today's interpreters, Alamundina Prices and Alika Delgado from Interpreters and Translators in Glastonbury, Connecticut. And I'd also like to thank our moderator, Lindsay Ewing from WICA, and Jillian Davey, a LISC AmeriCorps service worker. And I'd also like to thank our program committee, Jack Antonich, Janice Castle, and Emily Lugo. So I want to thank everyone who has contributed to this series to help us better understand our city and how it serves us, and what we can do actually to help our departments. We heard today that both police, fire, and emergency telecommunication services are looking for new hires. So we could be the voice to actually share that information as well. And please sign up for our newsletter. If you haven't already, you can go to our website, www.hartfordnext.org, contact us, and then you can be put on the distribution for a newsletter. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And we look forward to you joining us for future events. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your evening.